Hello and welcome to the Cradle News Roundup, your one-stop shop for all news West Asia. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I'm the head of news for the Cradle, and as usual, I'm joined by my colleagues, content creator and writer for the Cradle, Karim Shami, and back with us after a few weeks off, columnist and editor for the Cradle, Sharmin Narwani. And before we start, I just want to ask you to please share, like, and subscribe this video, to follow us on our social media channels, and to check out our Patreon, where you can become a supporter of the Cradle and give us the support to continue doing the work that we do here. So we are speaking today. The Israeli attacks against Lebanon have significantly intensified over recent days, targeting residential areas in Beirut, destroying towns in the south of Lebanon, destroying villages and towns in the east, hitting all the way to the north, just from north to south. But at the same time, Hezbollah attacks have also intensified in Israel, in Tel Aviv. Just a few hours ago, a Hezbollah missile made a direct impact in Tel Aviv. Rocket barrages, drone swarms are being nonstop in the north, in Haifa, in Tel Aviv, in the vicinity of Tel Aviv, targeting military sites, sensitive sites all across. In the south of Lebanon, fighting has been as intense as we have seen at any point. During this war, the Israeli army is trying to push forward. Hezbollah forces are hand heavy losses. And as all of this is happening, the U.S. Special Envoy for the region, Amos Hochstein, is, as we are recording this, in Beirut, meeting with Lebanese officials. Before his trip, the State Department said that Washington is determined to reach a ceasefire deal for Lebanon. Hochstein, just before I wrap up this intro right now, just want to point out that before he left for Beirut, Hochstein actually delayed his trip. He delayed his trip deliberately and to try to exert pressure against Beirut, asking them, we need clarifications on your stance on the ceasefire, right? And when we talk about the ceasefire, we only need to look at Gaza. We only need to look at the genocide in Gaza to understand where the efforts for a ceasefire really stand, right? When it comes from U.S. officials. But that's kind of the reality on the ground right now. As I said, Lebanon is getting hit very strongly. Israel not getting away clean either. So, what is next and what is happening on the ground, really?
So, in the past 3 days, Israel intensified their attacks in Lebanon, especially in the south, in the towns of Nabati and Tyre. Nabati alone had, in the past 48 hours, more than 150 airstrikes. And the area is somehow completely destroyed. And also, they destroyed the roads that they lead to Tyre, Sur. And of course, in the Bekaa area and the Bekaa Valley, there's also devastation. And what happened recently in the past also 3 days in Beirut, usually Israel gives warnings before they strike Beirut. Yesterday was the first time they struck a residential area in Dahi, which still has inhabitants because it's far from Har Tahrik and other places, and they downed a building. And I had a personal experience. Israel 2 days ago bombed Marilyas. If our viewers saw the strike, this was very close to my house. It was around 50 meters away from my house. Of course, we heard the missiles before they hit, and there were 4 explosions. And it was terrifying because your enemy is Israel. You don't know where they're gonna hit because what they hit a large building in my neighborhood. It's one of the biggest buildings, and it hosts residential buildings. And the first 2 or 3 floors, there's doctors and there's like commercial shops where you can buy like
They came with no warning, right, Karim? Like, no, they were not believe.
without any warning. And there's a lot of refugees there. Even in my apartment, there's like 4 or 5 families of refugees on the apartment besides us. And down the road, there is a school next to the building that was hit. I think it was like no more than 70 or 60 meters from the school. And down the road, there's like 6 or 7 schools, half of which there's refugees there. So I was sitting at my house and I heard the missile. Of course, I ran to check on my mother and other members of my family. And then we heard second, the third, and the fourth. And as I was saying, because the enemy or the entity that's targeting us is Israel, you will never know where the missile is gonna hit. So we embraced ourselves, and fortunately for us, but unfortunately for others, the missiles hit a building next to us, and the Ministry of Interior said that 3 people died during this event, and one of them were just a little girl passing by the street, because it's as I told you, it's a residential area, and Marias is very known. Many people go there to buy clothes or to buy electronics. Yeah, the area there is known by that. And what is like odd is that the shop that they were that was targeted is like a herb shop that sells like healthy stuff, like foreign thyme, or like
Because they claimed it was a Hezbollah official, right? Like some rocket squadron leader or someone, something.
the propaganda and the media. That's what they said, and of course the Arab media picked it up, and they said he's a leader in Hezbollah and whatever. And even this shop that was the name Ayub was circulating in the media. I know personally this guy, and I lived in this area more than yani, I was born there. I lived there more than 25 years, and I know this guy. This guy comes to his shop, opens the shop at like 7 a.m. and leaves at 7 p.m. I don't know how he's a military leader in Hezbollah. How he doesn't have
What
even.
time?
Yeah, and I just want to mention something that happened, and the media didn't catch it up, because I think from the structure of the building, people didn't know what happened. So they fired 4 missiles that exploded in the building, and one of them penetrated the building to the backyard of the building, and it hit a basketball court. But thankfully, there were no children playing in the basketball court. And of course, yesterday, of course, even without any warning, they targeted an area called Zgakl. Also, they said the Ministry of Interior said that around 6 people were killed, and 12 were injured, and among them are people that play football in a Lebanese local team. It's called Nijme, and people were injured and killed from this team.
The what's happened the last few days in Beirut is essentially Israel striking non-Shia neighborhoods. I mean, that's essentially what's different. Without warning, with spurious claims about Hezbollah official being here or there.
Yeah. Is the Gaza
In the case of the killing of Mohammed Afif, who was the official Hezbollah spokesman, he was in a Christian part of town, actually a few hundred meters from where I live, and then your area, Karim, is mixed, and they're targeting these areas very slyly, and I don't think anyone's trying to hide at this point, because analysts have rushed to point out that Israel's just trying to gain some cards, psychological though they may be, to push Lebanese parties and populations to support a ceasefire, no matter what the terms are. It's pretty transparent for us that that's what Israel's trying to do. It's not consistently one neighborhood. It's just a few here and there, but doing missile level damage in these neighborhoods that felt relatively safe. Because let's be honest, if we had the Dahiya doctrine in like 2006, this is the Shia doctrine. Okay, Israel is hitting in the south of Lebanon, in the Beirut suburbs, in Bekaa. They're targeting Shia, and they are targeting, sort of on the periphery, Shia displaced persons in other neighborhoods. But as a warning to create, and not just as a warning, to create civil strife.
Yes.
So if Shia have moved into Christian neighborhoods happily with residents welcoming them, weeks and weeks later, these same residents are questioning whether these people should even be in their neighborhoods, because that they now risk their building being blown up.
But this is exactly what Karim said, right, about the media, the incitement in the media, the misinformation, and particularly in Lebanese media, which we have touched upon already a few times in this podcast, that they seem to be very open towards the Zionist agenda, right, which is to incite civil strife, incite us. Yesterday, Haaretz had this headline saying, "Is Lebanon about to, go into its third civil war?" I'm still unaware which one is the second civil war, but according to them, there's a third one coming. So yeah, like just to like highlight that part of the point you're making, Charmaine, that is a multi-sided effort that's trying to just spark the street inside Lebanon to ignite it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of panic in certain political groups in Lebanon, and even sort of chattering civilians about these escalations. And it's really important to not missing the forest for the trees, because in terms of I've always called this a PR war for Israel, right? I mean, it's not good for their public relations, but they strike things to get maximum impact among populations, news viewers and readers, and governments around the world, right? But are they attaining any of their strategic goals? I mean, there's not a single one they've attained since the beginning, since October 7th, 2023. And then, again, let's, rewind and go back to why they decided to launch a land invasion of Lebanon. It was because they said their ostensibly their war goal was to get Israeli settlers back into the northern settlements. And that has not happened. The opposite has happened. Not only are most of these settlements completely empty right now, and Hezbollah has managed to penetrate even deeper into the north, so even more settlements have emptied out. But now you have major cities in Haifa, in Tiberias, in Tel Aviv, and the areas, the Gush Dan area, the triangle around Tel Aviv. Bless you, Karim. Yesterday, last night, Hezbollah did a very successful hit on Ramat Gan, which is also, on the outskirts of Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
Something we hadn't seen before, bring the war to their cities, and the way Israel's trying to bring the war to Beirut. And the thing is, these people are living, these Israelis now, in the major cities and towns outside the northern settlements, are now living in constant fear with sirens, running their daily lives. All normalcy has come to a stop, because now they're seeing fires, they're seeing buildings being hit. Within in the Ramat Gan strike that Hezbollah did last night, you had all glass, all windows within a 1 kilometer distance shattered. I mean, it reminds us of what we experienced in Lebanon during the Beirut port explosion. There was glass everywhere in the streets, and they remained for weeks and weeks, if in some cases not months. So, Israel strategically, Israel's kind of run out of targets, right? In the initial days and weeks of their escalation in Lebanon, you could see clear strategic targets. Okay, in their mind, they believe to take out the entire leadership of Hezbollah, from the Secretary General down to the military commanders, etc., would buy them a strategic victory. It didn't. Right? Hezbollah continued to launch missiles, continued to escalate. According to how Israel escalated in Lebanon. This is just it's a shit show for Israel. They're not achieving anything, and there is the law of diminishing returns, right? So, in essence, Israel's doing more, but achieving less strategically. Okay. In the court of public opinion, it's losing even more. A lot more people are paying attention to Lebanon now suddenly. But importantly, it's war goals, getting settlers back to the north, getting hostages back in Gaza. By escalating Gaza, remember in the first months, there were negotiations, and there were temporary ceasefire deals, right, in which Israel got back over 100 of the captives, right? Then it escalated for different reasons, unstated war goals, which was making Gaza uninhabitable, forcing Palestinians out of Gaza, annexing Gaza, building beachfront properties, etc. All unstated goals. Eradicating Hamas, that has not happened in over a year. Eradicating Hezbollah by going for its leadership, that has not happened. So what is, if anything, Israel's major cities, towns, infrastructure, military bases are getting decimated. They're getting hit with even more frequency in you know, with Hezbollah hitting deeper into Israeli territory. Uh, Again, but people are largely, I would say that's true of Lebanon, are distracted by the damage Israel is doing, which is taking away from the understanding that Israel is racking up strategic losses. At least there are no strategic wins it can count on.
And right now, just to go back to the ceasefire talks, right? Because that's the thing right now. Hochstein is in Beirut.
Yeah.
Lebanese officials have been very clear. Lebanese officials who are not exactly always have the interest of the Lebanese people at the front of their mind, but they have been very clear in saying we are negotiating under constant escalation, right? And this is what Israel said themselves too. Like Netanyahu said something to that regard as well. Like if we want to keep freedom of attacks, right, of movement in Lebanese airspace, in the Lebanese territory, even if we sign a ceasefire. And you had Benny Gantz, right, this guy who was by the White House presented as the moderate Israeli leader. A couple of days ago, he comes out with this video saying that the south of Lebanon needs to be turned into something like Area A in the West Bank, right, where the Israeli army has the ability to just come in and out, continue attacks, essentially annex the south of Lebanon. You have the Jerusalem Post, with headline after headline saying actually southern Lebanon is more like northern Israel. Is Lebanon part of the promised land that is that was promised to the Jewish people, etc.? This the consent is being formed for the occupation of South Lebanon. And I think, right now when you see someone like Amos Hochstein, who is on like who knows what number trip this is since the start of the war to Beirut, and just come in and essentially blackmail, coerce officials, right? Because the United States, what it's looking for is to dismantle Hezbollah, not just on a military level, but also on a political, on a societal level. But their pressure seems to not be working, at least not yet, right? Al Akbar had a report a few days ago talking about frustration within the U.S. Embassy about why their leaders in Lebanon are not picking up arms and going and fighting alongside the Zionists. And that should show you the complete lack of understanding that exists about the reality in Lebanon today.
I personally don't think there's going to be a ceasefire. Don't quote me on this.
I doubt it.
I know there's a lot of anticipation now. There's a lot of analysis flying around. There's news reports suggesting, Amos Hochstein wouldn't have come here had there not been some capitulation on the Lebanese side. But I personally don't see how Lebanon can capitulate. Like, what are they going to go to? It's not like a ceasefire or peace deal is offering Lebanon any upsides whatsoever except stopping Israeli bombing, which is significant, but it would take a great loss. Lebanon entered the fray on October 8th, 2023 to stop the Israeli bombardment of Gaza. We all live in this neighborhood. We're all interlinked, we're all historically, come from the same people, right? We've been here thousands and thousands of years. The Levant is one area. It's defined, right? That's Palestine, that's Lebanon, that's Syria, that's Jordan, and occupied Palestine too. And I personally think it's great that Lebanon stood up for Palestine. It's something that Arab populations, even outside the Levant, have been dying to see with their own leaders.
Yeah.
who haven't delivered. So, I think the people are very much standing with Gaza. Um, this would be a massive loss for Hezbollah if there was a ceasefire, to be honest, which doesn't mean that Hezbollah is against peace. I mean, Hezbollah has said very clearly, we don't want a war. They have said so since right from the start,
Yeah.
as have every single member of the resistance axis. And they've even done things to show they don't want to escalate. They could have escalated further. They've been very, very calculating and strategic about any big new moves they make. But it's very easy to get a ceasefire for everybody, for Joe Biden, if he wants one before he leaves the White House. Stop the war in Gaza. Stop the war in Gaza. Ansarullah in Yemen stops. The Iraqi resistance stops. The Lebanese resistance stops. The Palestinian resistance stops. You know, that's it. It's so simple. And the world community is calling to stop the war in Gaza, right?
Yeah.
So all this distraction about why isn't Hezbollah, agreeing to a ceasefire? Stop, stop, stop. That's not the point. Lebanon would be in a much worse situation if it did capitulate to the terms of Amos Hochstein, and the desires of Joe Biden. In a much worse situation. I know people are saying, well, if Trump comes in, it's going to get even worse. It may get worse, but maybe just for a few months. And, we're going to save the Trump discussion for the extra segment we're going to do today, the
For
Patreon subscribers, because we haven't done one for a while. And I really want to get, knee deep into the possibilities with Trump. I think we all have a lot of ideas, and I think we're going to have a nice argument about that. So, but I do think that we have to, take the distracted masses and fix them on one clear, easy way for there to be a ceasefire for this war to end, which is Israel stopping the war in Gaza. You really don't need to go into details. You don't need to go into negotiations. I'll give you this, I'll give you. Stop the war in Gaza. It all falls into place.
Exactly. What do you think, Karim? What is your take on this?
My take, everything that Charmin said is logic. Of course, Hezbollah might stop the war with Israel if he agrees with in the negotiations, but he will lose a lot if he agrees because people support Hezbollah because he's the resistance against Israel. If he complies what Israel wants, he will not be in a good situation with his supporters.
Not just resistance against Israel, but really the last line of support for Lebanon's frayed sovereignty.
Yeah, in Lebanon, sovereignty is a point of view. And for instance, there's parties that see their sovereignty of them being like ruled by the French, and some by Saudi Arabia, and some by the United States. And it's like, unfortunately, there's no true Lebanese in Lebanon as a thought and as a party. So, but of course, we saw what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan and Vietnam and many places. The history tells us that if there's good for this region, of course, it's not the United States and its allies. So that's what Hezbollah is really resisting even before Gaza. And if people are asking what was Hezbollah doing previously, Hezbollah was in a coalition to defeat ISIS in Syria and Iraq. He trained people in Iraq and Syria. And of course, they stood up against these, of course, shady things that the United States and its allies do in the region. And that's what Hezbollah stands for. So, and the people stands with Hezbollah because of these ideas, because we know our identity is not going to the West. Our identity is not like following the UK or the French, which occupied this area. And that's Sharmi was saying. She was saying that Levant is one piece. Unfortunately, the Levant is not one piece now because of these countries, and they divided us. So me, in my thoughts and my point of view as a Lebanese, these are the enemies. But unfortunately, there's people in Lebanon that see the West as an ally. And as you mentioned before, Steban, you said that they are trying to make a civil war in Lebanon. So if people are saying how this might happen and Israel is attacking, people should know that there's people in Lebanon that are that support and are supported by the West, and they are willing to do that. They are few in numbers and they lack experience, but we saw a few incidents even before October 7th that tells us that this is a thing that might happen.
Yeah, but I think it is important to highlight what you just said, Karim, that there are very few, like because Lebanon is not just, like lack of support, I would guess, right? Like for these parties that are really just on the Zionist side. It's also like Lebanese Lebanon is a country of made up of its diaspora, right? It's a country which is like, like people migrate a lot. So when the US, when the West, right, in general, helped manufacture this economic crisis, right, that we saw Lebanon fall into, and an outcome of that was, people left, young people left. So all of a sudden, even if they want to ignite the street, there's really not that many left, right? And those who are left, do you want to be like the person who picks up a weapon and goes and like starts shooting other Lebanese in the back essentially, and starts helping the army that is launching bombs on residential buildings with no warning, killing paramedics, right? Killing 200 children in 2 months.
Those people don't care. They see that segment of Lebanon as subhuman, much like the Israelis do. There is a supremacist segment of this country, as we know. Often personified by Samir Jaja and his Lebanese forces. There are people affiliated with him and supporters of him who talk about creating Christian cantons in this country. They unfortunately, it is so important, as you mentioned, Esteban, to repeat what Karim said, that there are few, because what has happened, the pro-U.S. Christian forces in this country have lost their Sunni, right?
Yes.
After Gaza began.
Yes.
This is why they're few. What's going to happen? Who are they going to shoot at? Displaced people? I mean, seriously, let's not forget, Hezbollah is a non-state military actor by and large. It doesn't have a political wing that is represented in government, as members of parliament. It is in terms of per votes, per actual individual votes, it gets the most votes of any party regularly, by far, in every single election in this country. And they can go on for a long time. They started as an absolute guerrilla group without much arms, much training, and they got where they are, where they got to today. And they're absolutely prepared to hunker down for a long war. Don't forget, Hezbollah only came onto the front lines of this war in the last month and a half. Is it a month and a half already? Since
Yeah, you mean like ground warfare? It started first.
Yeah. So for it's only been around 6 weeks or so that Hezbollah has gone to the front lines. The Israelis have been on the front lines now for 13 months, right? And let's look at who really wants and needs the ceasefire in Lebanon, okay? It isn't Hezbollah. Many Lebanese would like it, and that's completely understandable.
Of course.
It's not Hezbollah that needs it. It's Israel that needs the ceasefire. The Israeli Army General Staff has talked about, war statistics. They've had to. People have demanded it. Israelis have demanded it. And of course, their statistics, we've always said at the Cradle, that, these statistics are way lower than the actual, numbers. So, the General Staff has said we urgently need more than 10,000 additional soldiers to fill the ranks after suffering substantial wartime losses. So almost 800 dead soldiers. You can double that. A quarter, easily, including a quarter of whom are officers. At least 63 company commanders and thousands, I'm talking tens of thousands, injured or permanently disabled. It's been like a good 8 months since I heard the 10,000 number, okay? And a lot of these have lost limbs, okay, and have gone blind. So meanwhile, the reserve forces, which Israel has heavily relied on, you saw the airplanes after October 7th of Israeli Jews like getting on flights and coming back like hooray, as though they're going on a camp holiday to come fight in Gaza. These reservists are stretched beyond capacity. Haaretz revealed recently that 54% of the reservists, so more than half of the reservists, have served over 100 days. 18, almost 20% of them have served over 200 days. This is not done in the Israeli military. It considers itself as a professional army, takes care of its soldiers, of its troops, etc. They're just being sent out to the front lines to be killed. Meanwhile, they haven't penetrated, you know, the Lebanese front line significantly at all. As far as I know, Karim, you can correct me on this, they still don't completely control a village, etc. One that hasn't already been destroyed before they got in, right? So villages that have been empty, they haven't commandeered anything. At the same time, the ultra-Orthodox issue has reared its head again in Israel, because many of these people the law changed, they said the ultra-Orthodox now have to serve in the army.
Yeah.
But a significant portion of the Haredim refused to serve. This created a political dilemma for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his coalition. And he's trying to figure out a way. If you're studying, I think just recently, yesterday, today, he said, if you're actively studying, you can be exempt. If you're not actively studying and you remember
There's nowhere else to fill in those gaps, right? And there's no one else to fill in.
Yeah.
They have to be the Haredim.
But what it also means is that Netanyahu needs a ceasefire. Rather, he has to make a strategic choice. Is he going to focus on Gaza, or is he going to continue with Lebanon? They've seen in 6 weeks, they've made zero progress and been hit so badly. I think his view is, oh my God, Gaza was so much easier for us, right? Let's take a win, a PR win, however they'll frame it, in Lebanon and get out of there. Israelis need the ceasefire more than Hezbollah does, in other words.
And this reminds me of, I think it was the Washington Post, and we discussed this briefly last week. They had this report about Israel preparing a January gift for Donald Trump, right? Like a Lebanon ceasefire in January, because what it looks like now is that Israel is really just kind of, you're going to use these 2 months to go, mad, even more than they were before, even more in Gaza, when you're talking about the deployment of the reservists and this silent crisis, of them not wanting to serve anymore, is because they keep getting sent back to the same neighborhoods. They keep getting sent back to Jabalia in North Gaza, where, we'll talk about this in a minute, about how the resistance is still very much active there, to Khan Yunis, to, just like across Gaza, all of the Gaza city, the neighborhoods, the places where they've already been, 3, 4, 5 times, that have already been flattened. So what is the difference in the south of Lebanon, right? Well, we have already established that Hezbollah is a better prepared, larger force than what Hamas is or was before the start of this war. And what do they expect on the ground, Israel, when it comes to Lebanon? Because I said, right, like they talk about like they're going to occupy the south of Lebanon. With whom and how? How are they going to push Hezbollah past the Litani?
They can't. This is a PR and a soundbite war for the Israelis. Honestly, if you just break it down, they have strategically already lost. The country's in shambles, the economy's in shambles. The global pressure, BDS, boycotts, have intensified. Major investment funds, major universities, and corporations have distanced themselves from this country. As have states. The UK's largest private pension fund divested $100 million in Israeli assets. Norwegian company, tech giants like Oracle and Intel have canceled multi-billion-dollar contracts. Even the energy sector has taken a massive hit, with BP, Chevron, others scaling back or suspending projects. And they know very well, these oil giants, that, what's up next if Israel continues to escalate against neighbors. And let's not forget, Israel's now talking about going to Syria, okay? That it's very likely and very easy for Israel's adversaries to hit its 3 gas fields. Okay. And then it's game over.
What do you think, Karim?
Regarding the question, I think when Israel assassinated the Secretary General of Hezbollah and the top leaders of Hezbollah, and they hit many places where Hezbollah, a stronghold, were, and of course they destroyed some depots for missiles. Following that, they announced that they want to invade Lebanon. I think they had miscalculations because really the heads were يعني they were huge. يعني if you take, for instance, Russia, which is the biggest country in the world, if you kill Putin, for instance, and all his cabinet and like all the generals, the country will collapse. And that's what they thought. And I think genuinely, that's what they thought. They thought now they can enter. We destroyed Hezbollah. And at the beginning, Hezbollah, it was clear that they were devastated because their attacks were shy at the beginning. And then they announced the second phase. Hezbollah, everybody can sense the recovery of Hezbollah since the past, I think, 10 days. So now,
Do you think it's when they announced the high bar operations, when they said, we're starting this new stage?
yeah, even when they started the Khyber operations, they were somehow shy and they were still targeting like some bases 40 kilometers away. But what's happening now, yeah, in the past 24 hours, Hezbollah targeted sites that are as far as 120 kilometers away from the nearest point from the Lebanese border, more than once. And just today, I think they did like 5 or 6 operations. So this, of course, significantly differs from when Israel announced that they want to dismantle all Hezbollah and push them to the Litani. Currently, I don't think anybody can do it. يعني what I mean is that if the United States in person, if they like put troops in northern Israel to help the Israelis, they can penetrate Hezbollah. Regarding Sharmin, they did some penetrations, especially in the village of Shama, which is I don't know from where they entered, but they entered deep into Lebanon from 4.5 to 5 kilometers, which is around 3 miles or 3.5 miles. But still, they didn't take the village. Until now, there's clashes inside the village. And as what happened in Khiyam, I think in the following 12 hours, or when this video is uploaded, people will start hearing that they retreated from Shama. Because the same thing happened in Khiyam. 1 week, they tried to enter a village. People, maybe our viewers might not understand. They can go to Google Maps or do some research. Lebanon is a very, very small country. When I say village, I say there's an area with like 20 to 25 homes. I'm not exaggerating. And all the clashes are being conducted in these houses or under the ground of these houses or from a mountain near these houses. And of course, a Merkava tank is like, I don't know, I think 6-7 meters or more. I think it's 8 meters. So a tank inside a village take like a percentage of the village, just to people understand what's happening. That's what's happening currently. And I always said something, and if I was an Israeli general, because we always have debates on and off camera, so I tell them that if I was an Israeli general, till now I'm not shocked, and I don't see why I will stop a war with Lebanon or with Hezbollah. But following what's happening, for instance, if I thought I was thinking that I destroyed Hezbollah, and now after the phase 2 of my operation, Hezbollah starts to target Tel Aviv, then after 3-4 months, what they will do. So now I think that Israel is really questioning, the recovery of Hezbollah is rapid, is fast, and they are using the things that they are recovering. It's very clear. And yesterday, what happened in Tel Aviv, of course, it's happening regularly in Lebanon, but unfortunately, we as Lebanese and as Arabs, we are prepared for that mentally and emotionally. But I don't think an Israeli that came from, I don't know, Dutchland to work in Israel and to get a salary of $10,000 and tell them, choose a land and you will have it, and they kick the Palestinians, he's not ready for this. So what happened yesterday is huge for Israel, and I don't think Israel can persist if this can be the new normal. Whereas we still exist, even though this is a new normal for Lebanon. It's not the first time. in the 70s and 80s, and even in the 60s and the 50s when they bombed our infrastructure, our airports, and all of this. I don't think there's any Lebanese that thought that Lebanon will be able to target Tel Aviv. That was like imaginary for any guy in Lebanon. So people, I think, I'm saying this for our viewers. I know we are, as the West say, we are a third world country. We don't have allies, unlike Mikati, which is we have to talk about him. Yesterday or on the previous days, he said we are working with our allies. I stopped reading. My colleague was next to me. I told her, please tell me who's the allies of Lebanon. What does he mean when he says allies of Lebanon? Is it Saudi Arabia? Is it the United States that gives weapons to Israel? Who are our allies? So again, there's many people delusional, and that resistance, I think, will persist. And we don't have other choice. As Lebanese, we don't have our other choice.
No,
We have just
before, just I want to point out, because you're talking about, it was an impossibility in many people's minds that Hezbollah will be able to target Tel Aviv. As we are talking, Hezbollah announces a new missile attack at Israel's Gilot military intelligence base outside of Tel Aviv, and Israel is saying at least 35 projectiles have been fired into Israel just in the past hour alone. So, it's a completely different world.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and in the 80s, they invaded Lebanon. They controlled almost 50% of Lebanon till Beirut. Then they were pushed back, and they stayed in the south of Lebanon, which is not all south Lebanon, parts of south of Lebanon. It was, to be exact, 9.8% of Lebanon was occupied from 1982 till 2000. Okay, we had like 18 years, and we barely were able to target like northern Haifa. But now it's different. So there's the balance is changing. It's slow, and of course, many prices are being paid, but the balance is changing, which is a very significant thing for a country like Lebanon. It's very small, and we don't have allies that give us like sophisticated stuff. But Iran currently, they have advanced missiles, and in the past 10 years. But of course, United States, Germany, whatever, all these countries, they are controlled by the, of course, Israeli lobby. Each country controlled in a different way. APAC in the United States, and the TV and media in Germany, of course, and their education system, and bankers in the UK, they are controlling them, but we don't control anybody. Everybody tries to control us. And I think this is as significant as a proper Lebanese citizen. I'm happy of what I'm seeing.
So let's move on from Lebanon for now, before we wrap up this week's episode, because we really should discuss the deteriorating situation in the north of Gaza, where just a few days ago, the Israeli army displaced about 100,000 Palestinians in 24 hours. A figure that is just truly impossible to imagine, until you see the images, until you see you hear the reports about what's going on. As I made mention a couple of minutes ago, the battles have been ongoing in the north of Gaza. The Qassam brigades are still killing Israeli soldiers. They're still hitting Merkava tanks. They are, essentially popping out of the ground, doing these, I guess you could describe them here as just hit and run attacks, or just, setting up ambushes, etc. But on the other hand, right, you have the general's plan. You have the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian population. We talk a lot about the north of Gaza. That's not to say that the south of Gaza hasn't been getting hit. Khan Yunis has been getting bombed. Gaza City has been getting bombed. You have massacres happening on the daily. No aid entering Gaza, just, the bare minimum. Now you have roving gangs of blackmailers who are looting aid shipments under the watchful eye of the Israeli army, who do nothing. They have pushed the Gaza Interior Ministry to form this called Arrow Unit, civilians who are essentially trying to stop these gangs from taking the aid, from selling it at the markets at completely marked up prices, etc. Just a complete chaos, complete anarchy. The societal fabric has broken in the south of Gaza, while in the north of Gaza, we are seeing a full blown Holocaust happening there. We have even stopped hearing about a ceasefire for Gaza, right? At this point, like all the ceasefire is just about Lebanon. But when it comes to Gaza, it seems to be just kind of like, well, what's happening is happening.
Yeah, yesterday Netanyahu gave a speech. On the speech said, "Look, it's not our problem. It's the problem of the Palestinians because Hamas is not accepting a deal." And he said, and he like had an evidence and said, "Look, even the Americans say it. So I'm not lying to you." So I just want to have a brief comment over what you said before Sharmin continues. That's what's happening in northern Gaza, or it's happening in northern Gaza because unfortunately, now Israel they have a plan in northern Gaza. They want to uh, empty northern Gaza from the Palestinians, and they did like many conferences, and they named these new settlements, and they are urging people to go there, and they have a plan for northern Gaza. And of course, this plan can't be accomplished. Either you have to kill all of the Palestinians, which they tried to do, or خلاص you have to forcibly move them. Yani they are moving them naked, blindfolded, and currently the weather in occupied Palestine is the same in Lebanon. Today and yesterday there were very heavy rains and the weather changed. And I'm often thinking about that. And here in Lebanon, I can wear still a jacket, but if you're like handcuffed and folded, uh, and you lived more than 1 year after under bombardment and you didn't die, and then you see yourself walking like 10, 20 kilometers blindfolded under the rain. It's inhumane. I don't know. Maybe there's word for this, but I don't know it. It's really
Barbarism.
yeah. It's illogical. It defies any humanity, I think.
I mean, I it's always perplexing to us, given all the international law that exists out there, all the international institutions, the various conferences, summits, symposiums, going on between world leaders and thought leaders, that nobody's doing anything about Gaza. Um, but I remind y'all that the resistance axis are doing something about Gaza. But the Axis has not gone full throttle yet because they were trying to avoid this. They were foolishly, perhaps, um, under the impression that the adversary was human, was logical, rational, afraid of punishment itself. You know, Netanyahu's like scaly beast. I literally, Israel's exhausted in every way, and Netanyahu's still plotting new directions. Let's go start bombing Syria. They're bombing Syria on a daily basis now. It used to be like once in a blue moon. It's daily now. Um, he wants to escalate. He wants to go. He's dying to go into Iraq, and the Americans won't let him. But here we have the clash of supposedly the free world, right? The world that led the previous global order, um, uh, dropping its mask, showing its ugly face, the face that many of us have known existed for decades and decades. Okay, I think this is just the pain we have to go through to come out on the other end genuinely independent and genuinely free from the crushing fist of the Americans, of the Israelis, and whoever the hegemon is in various parts of the world. So I don't see anyone rushing to Gaza's help except the resistance axis escalating. I mean, of course, there are interesting things happening. It's become unpalatable and embarrassing for many Arab and Muslim leaders. We've had, of course, Erdogan's Turkey recently say he's cut off all relations with Israel, right? All ties with Israel. You have Mohammed bin Salman calling what's happening in Gaza a genocide for the first time. It took him only 13 months to say that word, to say the G word.
Regrettably in the dictionary.
And even like tell the Americans, no, we're not gonna tolerate the bombing of Iran, because they're worried it'll spill over. So you see, like these folks, the sort of pro-U.S. Arabs and Muslim, basically thought, well, Israel's going to take care of this problem for us. It always was a problem for us. We like the global order; it serves us because we're wealthy. These people now are also tired, right? It's become embarrassing from them. It's become a drain on their legitimacy and their credibility domestically, regionally, etc. So I think people are looking for a solution, but that solution is only going to come through resistance. We cannot let Israel win anything. It isn't winning anything, right? I mean, people make it out certainly in Lebanon as though Israel's winning every single day. It really isn't. Okay, it has made zero strategic gains. It is only capable of punishing now. Okay, but we knew this. If you look a few years back at people who were talking about geopolitics of the world and the shift of the centers of power, the emergence of Russia and China as a new pole, etc. We were talking about how like great change is happening, but even like bankers in like London and New York were saying, yes, we really are undergoing a seismic shift now. It's going to be difficult days ahead. It is difficult. Change is difficult. If you look in your personal life, it is it's a challenge, right? I'm not saying, oh yeah, well, let's just die while no, we in order to shift people who have their talons into the system, economically, militarily, politically, diplomatically, we have to declaw them. Okay. That is going to take time and effort, and it is going to be punishing, but it will be punishing for the ones who are dragging on these wars and are initiating these wars at the last stages of their lives, as global leaders. So unfortunately, we're just going to have to escalate until, so simple, guys, stop the war in Gaza and it all stops. That's it.
And it has been it from the beginning, like at this point, we've been saying this for 13 months.
I
But
know,
not
but people
no.
are distracted, Esteban, like, when we're reading stuff, and you're covering it every day, people are distracted by this and that and ceasefire talks and these negotiations and that. There's only one thing that can stop it, because let's say Hezbollah collapses tomorrow and Hamas collapses tomorrow. Nothing's going to stop Yemen, right? You have to stop the war, and Israel has to stop bombing Gaza, has to pull out its troops, and then it's all over. It's so simple. We just literally have to bang down at people's heads. It's that easy,
Yeah, but like Israel, what it has been doing, especially after the dismissal of Yoav Galant, is really just this thing that they like to do, which is the facts on the ground, right? Like that's what they do in the West Bank. They start building something so that they can say we can't be removed from here. In Gaza, they're doing the same, right? They turned the Netzarim corridor into the Netzarim something else, like occupied area, like essentially permanent. Now we're staying here forever. They're ethnically cleansing the north because, as Karim said, they want to resettle it.
And say, and for instance, of course, the price might be huge, but of course, it won't be bigger than what Algeria paid for its independence, what the Russians paid following the invasion of Hitler, or what Vietnam paid.
even what Iraq and Afghanistan have endured. It won't be as bad as those things,
Because people are saying,
unless a nuclear bomb goes off, but then Israel's finished. It's completely finished. And a nuclear weapon, by the way, BB, does not stop incoming ballistic missiles and incoming hypersonic missiles from hitting you, and your cities and your everything, right? I feel like the resistance axis is too moral for its own good. I imagine it has its own strategic considerations, logistical considerations, etc. But I think they're learning. They're being, how we talk about Israel training and grooming its allies to accept bad behavior. What the resistance axis is learning is that this entity is not agreement compliant. They don't act rationally. They don't act humanely. There's no dealing with them whatsoever. And so we have to match them now. You know what I mean? And yet last night in Tel Aviv, where we saw buildings burning and glass all strewn over 1 mile radius or 1 kilometer radius of Tel Aviv, and people screaming, was a little taste of that. You know, there's a lot more that can be done. You know, when I've talked about the escalation ladder before, Israel has reached the top of the escalation ladder. You know, this is why it's doing stupid things like hitting Christian neighborhood, hitting a Sunni neighborhood. You know, it's finished. It's depleted its target packs. But we haven't. We have not. The Axis has not, and Iran repeatedly in the last days. You know, I guess I don't think the Iranian officials are coming out and just making these statements. I think they're being asked by journalists, but it seems to be the same question because they're saying repeatedly, we will have Operation True Promise 3. That will happen. It's coming. You know, and I think that calculation doesn't have to do with Biden leaving, Trump coming in. I don't know if timing has something to do with it, but I think however the resistance acts, and it does act very incrementally, very calculatingly, very slowly, they will reach a point where they will understand it's all hands in, right? All hands in. You hit them from all sides, all borders at the same time, and you don't stop until they're waving a white flag.
Yeah, and I just wanted to comment also today. I think it was the first time an Iranian official says that. I think also during an interview, he said that the West are not wrong when they say that we can do a nuclear bomb, and they are saying we can do it within 48 hours. And he added, I want to tell them that we can reduce the time period to even 24 hours. So I think this is also significant. Who said that is his name is Muhammad Jawad Zarijani, and he's
The top political advisor to Khamenei on foreign policy.
100%, yeah.
So because we heard about that, right? Like they've been talking recently about like we will change the doctrine, you know, like raising these concerns, but well, not something I want to think about too much, in all honesty, you know, like having to reach that level.
No, I mean, there is a natural deterrence to nuclear warfare.
Of course.
And it is the game. Only one country has ever used it, and then Hollywooded themselves until we forgot. But
That
Israel
yeah.
Israel doesn't have that possibility. It just simply doesn't. It's a different world where this is happening. They basically Israel, you know, is doing these wars are happening as the world is shifting to you know, to welcome a new multipolar world. So it's not the end of the Second World War. It's not where the West had won, or rather the Nazis had lost and the Soviets had been significantly depleted and exhausted in manpower, right? So that the Americans could plant a flag on some dumb thing and be like, woohoo, we won. This is a very different scene. There is no American winner in this. And if Israel uses a nuclear weapon, it's goodbye Israel. And then talk about genuine anti-Semitism maybe emerging, you know, for the next generation or so. So I think that's something that nuclear powers like Russia and China will not tolerate. Not for 1 second. Israel is not a declared nuclear state. It's not a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. It does not have monitoring, and this is not something the 5 nuclear nations should ever put up with, because then you open the can of worms from Pakistan, India, etc. Other the Saudis, the Emiratis, others who want nuclear power, civilian power, obviously, but then they want a bomb in order to protect themselves, right? So
I guess they have to sit at the adults table, right? Like that's kind of how they see it.
But Netanyahu's a rampaging bull, you know. So you know, the guy is one of those. He's kind of Trumpian in that I don't care how old he is or how purple his hair is. He just looks like he has infinite energy to take on another confrontation. You know, I've seen these people in the corporate world. They just love a good fight. They love to lawyer up, and you know, the man is Trumpian that way, like a bull and ready to go. But there are many ways to curtail it. Let's not forget, within Israel, there are many political centers of power who want him
And his
curtailed.
criminal trial.
And the
right?
courts, and the
He's
courts as well.
collecting criminal trials.
Yes, correct. And wait for the next segment, because we may talk about how Trump may de-Netanyahu Israel.
Exactly. So please check out our Patreon. You can become a subscriber and you can listen to some extra content, some extra discussion. This week, we will be discussing this, the Trump effect in particular, right? We're going to get our thoughts in regarding this. But as far as our main podcast, we want to thank you for joining us. Please make sure to like, to share, to subscribe, to follow us on X, on Telegram, to find us on Instagram as well. And again, to check out our Patreon where you can support the work that we do here at the Cradle. For the Cradle News Roundup, my name is Esteban Carrillo. I have been joined by Karim Shami and Sharmin Narwani.